All right, let's talk about more furry convention drama. Jesus. The demons, even they're unhappy with me talking about this. And in this case, we have two specific scenarios. One of someone wearing a diaper on the outside of their fursuit in broad daylight, middle of the day. Very bold, I must say. I think that's a Tykables brand too. Huh, interesting. Don't know why I know that. And then the other scenario or happening being someone wearing an inflatable balloon animal suit, which honestly looks really heckin' cute. This is the sort of stuff that I want to see more at cons. You know, these inflatable suit things, which doesn't have an innately sexual nature to it. I like it. You know, it's cutesy. It's a little balloon animal guy. He looks like he's having a good time. What's the problem with it? Now, the reason why I want to talk about this is because it kind of relates to my lingering video that I've wanted to do on the puphood drama that goes around the furry community like once or twice a year. It's annoying to see, but the same argument comes up time and time again about like, is it appropriate to wear in certain spaces at conventions, depending on is it like sexual nature or not, or is the person wearing it doing anything provocative or not? And there's many different approaches and arguments people have had about it, but I've wanted to do justice to that video. I don't want to just throw it out there and quite honestly make everyone angry and not really offer a solution. So I saw this happening on Twitter, which was actually how I learned about Denver happening, and the same arguments kind of arose with regards to the puphood drama of just like what is appropriate to wear in a furry convention space for all ages and what isn't. I want to give some critical thinking, maybe my thoughts and opinions on it, which you should also take with a grain of salt since I'm just a YouTuber. I wasn't also at Denver to see this happen too, so you could have an entirely different experience from what you see and hear online versus what actually happened. And so I want to talk about it today, specifically starting with the inflatable balloon animal suit. But first, I gotta drink my pissel. It is completely melted. It's all just water at the bottom. I'm sad. But hey, it's pumpkin season. Ugh. I'm so pumped for the fall. I'm gonna fill my ass with leaves. I love that meme so much. I gotta get a draw over of that one of these days. Look, any furry artist that would like to do a draw over of my Sona in that scenario, please let me know and I can send money. It's called commission. I don't want to say that word though, because then the Twitter bots will be up my ass and I don't need that. I already have it filled with leaves. Thank you very much. So with the inflatable balloon animal suit, it's just pretty much what it is. The argument that a lot of people were having about this one specifically, even though the post itself is supposed to be supportive and showing off how creative the community is, which it is. I mean, look at that. You can have now inflatable suits to go around cons with. It looks awesome, like genuinely. It's a nice change of pace to see something like that honestly isn't like strictly, you know, provocative in nature. Now, the main argument that folks had against this inflatable suit being out and about at a con is that it could be tied to a kink or fetish. That fetish being an inflatable suit, they don't know if the person inside it is enjoying it more than just wearing it, or something else for that matter. If it's appropriate attire based on it can be perceived as a fetish, or it's looked at as such, because furries might like it that way. And one of the arguments being that it was made by an inflatable company that is 18+. That company being Candy Coated Squeak, which I've gotten plenty of things from them before. It's a really, really cool inflatable company. I'm just saying, I vibe with it. Some things I could probably wear around a con space and some I couldn't, but it doesn't intrinsically mean that it is supposed to be a fetish or kink thing. And that's more of the counter argument that I have for this, and I feel like a lot of people just kind of looked at this inflatable suit and saw, oh, it's cutesy, it's adorable. It is not inherently sexual. The person wearing it is not doing any sexual or provocative acts in it. The person who's wearing it is just going around as a balloon animal, and that's really about it. To some extent, I can kind of understand trying to wonder, is this a sort of fetish or kink thing? Because sometimes there is that underlying factor. But the key point that I think really needs to be taken into account with situations like this is you don't know that. You don't know if the person wearing it is enjoying it more than they are, or if it is just simply someone wearing an inflatable suit and enjoying it. Realistically, all you can really do is try to read intention, which even then, that is not entirely clear. We don't know what the person inside the suit is feeling or thinking. I could be wrong, too, in thinking that they are just kind of going about enjoying the outfit, enjoying the suit, and going about the con. But I think it's safe to say, at least in this case with the suit going around, is that it's completely fine. Just because it can be seen as an inflation fetish or a kink thing doesn't mean that it is necessarily the case with how it's being presented. And that goes for anything too. The same argument, can be reversed, where anything within furry can be seen as a kink or fetish. Does it mean that it inherently is? No. And that's sort of the main point that I think a lot of people are leaning towards. Not many people had an issue with it. If anything, it was like one or two or maybe a few people saying like, oh, this could be a fetish inflation thing, so it shouldn't be out and about in a con space, especially one that has children around. And like I said, a majority of people I feel like really liked this costume or outfit. That's why I kind of wanted to talk about this, because I can draw some comparisons to how I view my sort of life jacket thing with regards to this. I guess the only thing that wouldn't be safe for this is like anything pointy that could pop it. So there's that. But that's just for the balloon animal suit. So now that we've covered that bit of it, let's go on to the fursuiter wearing a diaper, aka the biggest discussion point about appropriate attire at a con from this weekend at Denver. Look, I have to say this because some people got really upset with me with my Elon Musk video. I'm saying this now. I support baby furs. They're cool. They're fine. You do your thing. It's not my thing personally, but you're happy and you're not bothering anyone else and you're existing, doing your own thing, and I respect and appreciate that. And of course, I have plenty of friends who, are baby furs, ABDL furries. I've gone to those parties because I like spending time with those friends because they're nice. So the scenario, as I said earlier, was someone took a picture of someone waiting outside of registration, I believe in the middle of the day, around 2:30 p.m. or so. They were in fursuit, they had their head off at the time, but they were in a very visible diaper and a harness. Which the harness, that's a whole separate thing, which could lead to, I guess, the discussion of previously inappropriate attire that some people thought was inappropriate at cons, but now is more like an okay thing. Like, the way I see it is if they weren't wearing the diaper and it was just the harness, no one would have batted an eye, which is really funny. Harnesses, from what I remember, used to be one of those like gray areas. I remember hearing some dumb argument where it was like, you can only wear a harness in fursuit if you're a husky to be like one of those sled dogs. If you wear it on any other animal fursuit, then you're making it like a sexually charged thing, which, like, dude. Which eventually it became more of like an openly accepted thing to wear on fursuits at cons. It was just one of those things that not many people, complained or batted an eye at. Same thing with sometimes people wearing underwear on the outside of fursuits, which is sort of an example that I want to talk about with regards to this. I don't know the fursuiter wearing the diaper on the outside of their fursuit, but I'm just saying this in my opinion. I don't think that's appropriate for a all ages con space event. Now, yes, you can take into account what we previously said about the inflatable suit. It's not inherently sexual in nature. And that might be the case. The person wearing it might just want to express themselves, and it might not have any adult or sexual connotations at all. However, there's a lot that you can kind of break down with even that in mind. The first thing, and correct me please in the comments if I'm wrong, I've always associated the ABDL and baby fur side of like furry as an 18 plus adult space. As such, adult baby diaper lover. That's the acronym for ABDL. So as such, I've seen it as an adult 18 plus thing. And then pair that with a diaper being, as I see it, an undergarment. Kind of the same thing as you see underwear, but it's obviously different in nature. And undergarments, you usually wear underneath clothing. You keep that kind of concealed, and when you bring that out in the open, it kind of brings out a more provocative nature. It's kind of ironic as well, with even applying that to like fursuits too. Like, say you have a fursuiter who's wearing like no clothing on, and they're technically naked, and it's completely fine. But as soon as you throw underwear over it, then it can be seen as like a provocative thing. That's just like really funny irony to me. And I think there's a point to be made as well on the opposite end of it, where like if I saw this out and about at the con, I really wouldn't care. Like I see this now and I'm like, cool. However, there were a lot of people that did care and expressed their opinions on it on Twitter. This could be a good example of like perceived intention versus actual intention. And I feel like the perceived intention of it being, an inappropriate thing to have around a con space, specifically, safe for work out in the middle of the day, kind of outweighs in this case the personal intention of it. And I do want to clarify too, before anyone immediately goes for my throat, I think something like this could be appropriate to wear in the specific circumstance in a specific con environment. If it wasn't like 2 p.m. in the middle of the day at registration, and if it was more at like 10, 11 p.m. in the evening during like the adult after dark hours of a con, I'd say it'd be fine. And it's kind of one of those like unspoken rules to some extent for some cons where they have after dark hours, where like after a certain time, then fursuiters and attendees can dress up in more like provocative kinky attire to express the adult side of it. Not every con has this. Some cons do have set rules for that too. I think some cons said like, okay, 9 p.m., 10 p.m. is the cutoff. That's when you can start wearing that stuff. And some cons might not even allow that at all. In situations where something that could be seen as provocative being exposed out in a con space in the middle of the day is that it's being exposed to kids who are attending the con, which you do not want to put in front of them. And that's more of a concern that I feel like a lot of folks would have with this. But realistically, what needs to be taken into account is how it can be perceived and the time and place. I always say this every single time. The Professor Oak saying, or I guess Professor Rowan, because I started with Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, there's a time and place for everything, but not now. Do not pull that bike out in the middle of the Poke Center. And I feel like this needs to be made the case for hopefully a lot of people who are critical about it as well, is that it's not a personal attack on the person. I did see a couple of arguments that people were making of like, oh, the person who was fursuiting is such a sweetheart, so like they're not like trying to have bad intentions with it. And that's valid and good, and you know, I'm sure they're a great person. In fact, I'd probably love to meet them at some point. They seem kind of nice. But like what needs to be made clear about that is even if that's the case, if the person is awesome and great and all, if something is inappropriate to wear at a con, it's inappropriate to wear at a con. Whenever something comes up about a furry convention happening, whether a con did something or an attendee at a con did something and the con is put on blast because of it, you have to keep in mind whenever stuff like this is taken into account, they always want to try to make the con better. And that's not something that's really given much credit or talked about. Example with Denver. I remember when I went last year, I had an okay time, like genuinely. One of the big issues that I had was that a lot of the room parties were shut down by like 8 p.m. From what I'm hearing with Denver this year, for what they're trying to do, is they have a party room floor, kind of like what FC does, a party floor where you can go to these parties where they're not going to be shut down, there won't be an issue with it. It was a solution to the issue that happened from previous years. But the bottom line with both of these scenarios of what is appropriate or what is inappropriate at cons, it really depends on how you look at it. I don't know, I feel like I've been talking in circles and I didn't do the best job at explaining this, but if I did, please do let me know in the comments below. If you have any thoughts or opinions on this, be respectful about it. You know, don't go out of your way to attack anyone. Obviously, don't go and harass anyone mentioned or talked about in this video. That's very cringe, and I know furries are cringe in a good way. Don't be cringe in a bad way. That's the lesson here. But either way, I wanted to talk about this today, mainly just to give some critical thinking with regards to the scenario, and hopefully this helps give some insight for those that didn't really think about it the way I did, and, you know, again, take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm just a YouTuber talking about something that happened on Twitter that not many people actually knew about. But either way, that's about going to do it for me. Have a wonderful night, take care, life stay jacket, and I'll see you all in the next one.